Folks, we're back. This is Steve Sampson, Jim Jonas, from another episode of Veterans in Politics. I boycotted Starbucks, so I'm with Dutch Bro now. Starbucks, they suck. Anyways, our guest today is going to be Will Rucker, candidate for Assembly District number 13, representing the great state of Nevada, up in the northwest area, Centennial Hills, but we let Will explain his boundary lines. Jim, you have anything?
Yeah, actually, I do. I think it's pretty interesting that, one of the things that I don't understand for the life of me why we as a country haven't learned yet about this is the federal government trying to mess around too much with the economy. So we've seen it happen before. And the main reason why I'm bringing it up is because the Senate just passed an anti-inflation bill. Okay, well, even the Congressional Budget Office, which is nonpartisan, said we won't feel any impact of that for 10 years. So, and it just, the only way that the federal government can really have an impact that's going to help us is by lowering the national debt, because that just impacts credit rates throughout the entire country. But for whatever reason, the federal government thinks that they can play around with the economy and somehow that's going to be some quick fix. Like we saw it with COVID, with all the, when they just kept passing more bills, just giving out more money and more money and more money, trying to prop up the economy because people had to stay in and that. And then when we saw it even worse, when President George W. Bush cut taxes by $1.3 trillion because coming out of the Clinton administration, we had a surplus. Well, what that ended up actually doing is it actually increased the national debt after 2 wars. So if the federal government could just try to stay out of the overall economy of the country and leave that up to the states, I think that would be more beneficial than the federal government continuing to mess around with stuff. For political gains, because they're just trying to appease people and say they're trying to do something. But if you're trying to do something and it's creating more harm than good, then just leave it alone.
So I get a call, right?
That's my opinion on it anyway.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
This guy's always into numbers and money.
Yeah.
He's not even a CPA guy.
Right.
But I get a call from the Stephanie Phillips girl. You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So turn on the TV. I turn on TV. I was like, FBI raided Trump?
Yeah. Mar-a-Lago.
I'm like, get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
Who raids a former sitting president?
The current FBI?
I'm like, crap, if the FBI is raiding a former sitting president, you and I are screwed.
Yeah.
We're just nobody.
Right, yeah.
Well, wow. I didn't believe that when I saw it.
Yeah.
But it is what it is.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing that's we've been on this trend for a while, but it's really gotten bad now with as far as just, it is truly political warfare now. Like if the whatever party that's in control, like if they don't like the former party, they'll go after them. Whatever they need to do, we see it with
so sad
impeachment constantly. Like
so sad.
I don't think Bill Clinton should have been impeached.
So sad.
Yeah, it's just.
I mean, he did everything everybody else is doing. JFK did it. It's so sad. You know what I mean?
Well, it's kind of like what you talked to me about. We got bigger fish to fry, right?
Look, we got veterans returning with PTSD. We got major mental illness in this country. You could tell by all the shootings that are going on, right? You got people being kicked out of school board meetings because they're involved, right? This is craziness. We got homeless issues. We got infrastructure problems. This is Mr. Rucker, how you doing today, sir?
Good.
You looking good. He got all your, oh man. He got all groomed up for the show. Look at him.
I try to stay clean.
Where'd you go? What barber do you use?
So my barber's name is DP, and he's right off of Las Vegas Boulevard, Blue Diamond area.
I thought you was over on 8th Street somewhere because they got some good barbers down there.
He must be good. You're traveling a good distance.
Yeah, I drive about 40 minutes to see him.
Yeah.
But he was up north with me for a while, but then he moved his shop. So
because I know the people down on H, they do a good job like that.
Yeah.
You went to Blue Diamond?
Yeah.
Wow, well, 8th Street is a lot closer.
Well, I'm loyal. What can I say?
All right, tell us about yourself, Mr. Rucker.
All right. So Will Rucker, candidate for State Assembly in District 13. And I'll start with why I decided to run.
Okay.
When I first put my hat in the race, it was really about getting.
You didn't really have a hat, did you?
I did not have a hat. But I was running to get my message out there because I have a podcast called Compassionate Las Vegas, the podcast. I co-lead an organization or a network called Compassionate Las Vegas. And I just thought that as a city, we needed to do a better job of really seeking to alleviate suffering. So when you're talking about mental illness and those sort of things, that's what we want to address, making sure everyone has a home. So I wanted to talk about that. But then I got in the race and I discovered, wow, there's a lot of things wrong with the way that we do politics. And my motto since I was a kid has been be the change. Right. And in order for me to live up to that, I had to actually run. And not only just run to say I did it, but run to actually obtain the seat and make a real difference. And so my background is diverse. I come from a neighborhood where kids didn't look like me. And I grew up that way. So I've always been very.
How do they look?
They look more like Jim over here.
Yeah. I figured you were saying you're more well dressed and they weren't.
I came into this later in life. I wasn't quite stylish as a kid. But then I went to a boarding high school where we had kids literally from all over the world. So there were more kids from the country of China than there were Black kids.
Wow.
Yeah. So, it was one of those things where I got exposed to a lot.
Lots of spies going on in this country.
Yeah, well, but I got to see the proverbial both sides of the tracks because I grew up upper middle class. Right. So both my parents worked. We had our own home, 2 cars, a dog and a fence, right? The life. But I was very poor in comparison to my classmates. They were taking summer vacations into Europe and, all of those things. They would go home for spring break and be on their yachts and their second homes. Yeah. And me, I'm like, okay, we're going to Disneyland. Like, great. Or Las Vegas, where I'm originally from Michigan. Yeah. So I really got to see the disparity in wealth there. But then moving beyond that, as I became an adult and ventured out into the professional world, I started off in business. My dad is a small business owner. Okay. I wanted to be a performing artist. And he's like, hey, why don't you try out business? And so I said, okay, I'll take a class or 2. I hated it. I was like, this is not for me. I want to do something more interesting, more fun, more creative. But then I got attached to the paycheck that comes when being in business. Yeah. And I understood, from that moment, I'm like, that's why you're a business owner. I get it. But fast forward many years, I was very successful in the telecommunications space, led teams from call centers to retail sales to door-to-door sales.
Is that what you do for a living?
And that's what I did. But when I moved here, I stayed in that career, but I just wasn't fulfilled. I really wanted to make a difference. So I've been bivocational my entire adult life. I've been a pastor for over 20 years.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah. And so I wanted to do something that meant something to me. Like the money was fine, whatever, but I wasn't fulfilled in my heart.
How does pastors make?
We don't. Pastors does not. Like you might.
You said the money was fine.
No, the money on the telecommunications side. Okay. Like, doing sales and that kind of thing. Okay. That was fine. But it was not fulfilling. I didn't feel as though I was truly making an impact. I learned a lot about different industries because in that field, you deal with schools and their infrastructure. You deal with the casinos and their infrastructure. I mean, you deal with the full spectrum. So I was recruited by the American Lung Association. And I was just supposed to be taking a contract to do some very targeted outreach and training for them. And it turned into an actual career that I love to this day. Right. So that's a little bit about my background. I have been with my partner for 19 years. It'll be 20 next year.
That's a minute.
Yeah, legally married going on 5 years. Okay. And we've got 3 amazing dogs and a few koi fish that keep us very busy.
Koi fish?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's get right to it. What are the boundary lines for 13?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask me that question. I wish I could tell you. And here's why.
No, stop.
Here's why
We're in the general election now, brother.
We are in the general. And here's why I say I can't tell you, because it's just not a clear-cut line. But essentially you go over to Aliante, Decatur, that area. That's about as far over there as we go. Other side down to Hualapai.
How far into Northtown is 13 now? Because it never used to be in Northtown.
Right. Yeah. So we are right about to the DMV area.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we just got a little bit of the tip of Aliante.
Okay.
Not a ton. It's about.
But is Aliante Casino in 13?
No, but you can throw a rock and hit it from 13.
Oh.
Yeah. It's right across the street.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but the lines are jagged, and like you might be in it, and you know the house next to you may be out. Like you really have to look when you get in that area.
Right.
But then you go down, and it's, I'd say probably Sky Canyon area. Okay. About most of that is in there, but it gets cut off where Hualapai and like 95 and 215, all of that is about the boundary.
You've been knocking on doors, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I personally knocked about 2,000.
Never knocked on my door.
Well, I was scared of your door.
So you can't get to my door. Yeah, Jim, I got a doorbell now.
You got a doorbell. I'm proud of you.
I got a doorbell now, Jim.
No,
but I don't have a front door.
In the primary, we only did Democrats because that's who was voting. So,
right, yeah, that makes sense.
Oh, what are you trying to say? You don't like us? I got a Democrat in my household.
Yeah, then you should have got a mailer from me at least. Yeah.
I don't know if she did or not. I would have to look. I don't think she did.
No.
Oh, I think her address is probably confidential. That's probably
okay.
That's probably why. But while you were knocking on these doors, what are the concerns you're hearing from the residents out there?
Wow, that's a good question. The one that I'll say surprised me the most was water. I mean, I'm aware.
Everybody's on well. What do you mean water?
No. Maybe where you are, but the majority of folks are on city water and very concerned about the extensive drought we've had in Lake Mead and that sort of thing. I didn't think people were as aware of that as they are. I've been a climate person since I was in elementary school.
Hold that thought. So, Jim, did you get a hold of the CEO of Las Vegas Valley Water?
They keep saying
Jim is supposed to get a hold of him.
Well, they keep saying that they're going to have somebody contact me, and I call them every day.
Jim, don't call them, Jim.
I know you want me to go down there, but they're just going to say the same. Okay.
Jim, go down there. We're trying to get the CEO from Las Vegas Valley Water to answer these water questions we have.
Okay. Well, I can tell you.
Jim lives right next door to Las Vegas Valley Water, but he won't make the walk.
I actually know quite a bit about it, but we want to get an actual representative on because they're kind of hiding.
I'm going to be bothering you every time until we get that guy on, or girl, whatever.
It's an important topic, and a lot of people don't know how great of a job Las Vegas does with water. So one thing we need to do, of course, is get like Boulder City back on the system. So they're doing those return credits. But aside from that, we are doing a phenomenal job. And the challenge we have is our neighboring states that are part of that compact. So a lot of people think that Las Vegas or, Southern Nevada has to do more than we're doing. And we do. We can still do better than we have. But we're doing a great job. My thought is we should have been thinking the way we're thinking now 10 years ago. And so that's really another reason why I'm running is I've noticed our government tends to be reactive to like whatever the thing that's on fire at the moment is, instead of thinking about, well, what happens down the line? I was at Hoover Dam and spoke with someone, I won't say who it was, but they've been around for a very long time. And I said, hey, did no one think about what happens when the water runs out? And his exact response to me was, well, when they built it, it was wet.
Yeah.
And I thought he was joking, but he was not joking. Like, no, it was wet. There was plenty of water. This was not a thing we thought about. So we have to start thinking about what happens down the line. You were talking a little bit about the spending bills and things. And there's no way to predict the actual impact of our decisions. We can hypothesize, think about, likely outcome, but we never really know. So that's another thing that is a concern in the area is why aren't we taking care of the things that we need to take care of? Education comes up at almost every door. Healthcare comes up at almost every door. And I know a lot of people, don't want to talk about taxes and being a part of a community, but Nevada doesn't have a state tax. So some things we have to do differently than other states do because we're just funded differently. And it's not that we can't do those things. And it's not that we can't do those things well. I think we could have the #1 school system in the United States. I really believe that because I do a lot of work with the teachers and we have phenomenal teachers. But we have to fund it well and we have to structure it well and we have to stop being so combative with each other.
Well, they said that if we pass recreational marijuana, they would use those tax dollars to fund education.
Yeah.
Are you willing to do an audit to find out where the heck is that money?
I did actually, and this is, Google research, right? But I looked into it and about 93% of those dollars actually go to fund education.
Why is the teacher still getting shitty pay?
Well, their pay was raised. So starting salary is about $51,000 now.
When did that get raised?
That just happened. That just happened. But as far as the marijuana money, the challenge is they're putting the money in the bucket, but there's a hole in the bottom of the bucket.
And somebody got their hand underneath the hole.
Yeah. So they're...
It's interesting you say that because I think Danielle Ford said the same thing. It was something, I forget the specific budgeting type that the Clark County School District uses. That basically they just get less and less each time.
Yeah.
So we have to fix that. And that's something I think we can do in this upcoming legislative session. It's definitely something I'm going to champion because for me, an investment in our children is an investment in our future. And the ROI on that can't be calculated because it's so great.
So how many BDRs do you get to? Two?
Yeah.
That's it?
Yeah. But that doesn't mean like I'm limited to just those two.
Two?
As far
I thought it was 10.
No.
2?
Yeah.
What are you going to do with 2?
And let me research because I'm new. I'm
I'd have
new.
a whole suitcase full.
I'll double check because if I get 10, that gives me a lot more bandwidth. But no, from my understanding, I would get 2. But 2 is a lot. It's
not.
It's 42 legislators.
Yeah, two to be the lead sponsor on. To actually propose, but you can be a co-sponsor on as many bills as you want. Yeah.
So what are your plans as a freshman legislature? What are your plans to fix the water issue? Some people will say that there's no issue.
Well, there is an issue, and there's an issue with our climate approach in general. Some folks are still debating whether it's man-made or whatever it is. To me, it doesn't matter where the problem came from. We've got to address it now. So that's thinking about the way that we develop. So I believe in the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. I think that they do a great job at outlining all of the steps that we need to take. But when we're looking from like a development standpoint, just here in Southern Nevada, we are surrounded by mountains. So we are geographically limited. We've got to think differently about how we grow. We've got about 10 years worth left of growth at our current rate. So what happens? We've got to start thinking about maybe more dense areas and multifamily units, things of that nature that we haven't necessarily done well in the past. But I want to go back to the water issue and the climate. What I can do about that is give it voice. I can talk about it. I'm one of 42, and we're one state out of many in this compact. California uses way more water than we do. Arizona uses way more water than we do. So we can't control that directly, but we can be a lot more direct and a lot more aggressive and a lot more collaborative in how we deal with this water crisis. My personal belief is we should have been investing in desalinization 10 years ago, but definitely now we need to do that. The way that the water is running just from the Colorado, it's different. And that water pattern may never return to what it was when the dam was built. So we have to look at other ways to do that. And we should do that again from a collaborative spirit. What I have seen is folks want to compete and get their way instead of collaborating to find the best path forward. So what I'll do as a freshman, number one, I'm going to learn. I'm going to listen to folks like you who know the issues, who have the legitimate concerns, and you've been in experiencing this for a while. So I'm going to learn from you, but I'm going to bring my expertise in cultural transformation and in business and the things that I'm really sharp at. I'm going to bring that to the table and synthesize the information you give me and say, well, hey, this is the best path forward. One thing that I'm really think is important to do anything of substance is to modernize our legislature. Right now, we meet every other year. A lot of folks don't know that. And you only meet 120 days. A lot of folks don't know that. I'm from Michigan. We have a full-time legislature, and that's what, when I came here, I'm like, oh, everybody has this. But no, that's not the way it works. So we've got to meet more often. I think we can do that by meeting annually, 60 and 60, or maybe 90 and 30, or, 105 and 15, whatever it is.
How long have you been in the state?
I've been in the state since 2014.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You've mentioned education. As a freshman legislator, what are you planning to do about that?
So there's a lot that I can do with that. Number one, I can elevate folks like Brittany Miller, who is an educator and an assemblywoman, and say, hey, Brittany, what can I support of yours? Because you know what you're doing.
Since you mentioned the name Brittany Miller, you ask her about my remove and retain bill, why she killed it when she was chair. That remove or retain is a bill that we put forward in the last session, and it never made it out of committee. She stopped it. It's supposed to, how judges, we can't recall a judge. Judges have term limits. Strike that. Judges don't have term limits. They have qualified immunity, right? A lot of attorneys don't want to run up against an incumbent. Because they're scared. You're scared. So what we do about bad judges? And people say, well, at the ballot box. But if a judge runs unopposed, the judge automatically another 6 years for district court. And then 6 more years of bullcrap corruption sitting on the bench, right? So we created remove or retain. So if remove gets more, seats vacated, Judicial Selection Committee calls in for applicants, sends 3 names to the governor. Governor picks one, that person runs for retention the next election year. That was the bill.
So in that kind of instance, I would need to know more of the details and why she opposed that in particular. I don't know, so I can't speak to it. But what I know that she does know is what it's like to be a teacher in the classroom and what their needs are and the resources that they lack. I do a lot of work with our school systems now. She was at Canarelli for a while. I do classes there helping kids to avoid vape and get off tobacco. And so those teachers, again, they're dynamic and they're overburdened. They have too many different responsibilities. They have to be teacher, they have to be counselor, they have to be friend, they have to be mom and dad, they have to be all these things. They have to be the food provider. Like there's so much that they have to do. So there are things we can affect that will make their jobs more effective and make them happier in their roles as well. So that's what I would lean to her. I don't believe in being an expert on everything. The things that I know well, I know human beings. I know, consciousness, that sort of thing. I know that well. I'm a pastor. I know faith and that kind of thing well. But I don't pretend to be an expert in climate and in construction and all these things. And what I've seen is legislators go to Carson or, DC or wherever it is, and they want to think that their way is the only right way. And they're not. It's their ego that's leading them. And so I'm wise enough to know I don't know enough to have an opinion about everything. So I look to the folks that do know and say, what is your solution? But I don't leave it at just, taking their word for it. I'm a systems thinker. So I'm like, well, how is this connected to this? In my view, education is connected to that retained bill you're talking about. Because if our kids enter into the system, then that judge that they encounter can impact their life for the rest of their life. So you have to get rid of bad judges. I think there has to be a mechanism to do that.
Would you support a bill like that?
Something like that, I absolutely would support without question. Now, again, I don't know the details of your particular bill and what else was in there, or, the nuances.
It's about as simple as I put it just right now. So Jim, you were going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to touch on it real quick before. I liked what you said about us being a part-time legislature. And I like that you said, let's not expand the 120. 120 days, but break it up. I've been talking about this for a number of years. I think they should meet every year, but for 60 days. Would you be willing to, because that not only would be, well, it would be a BDR, but it would also be, I believe you'd have to amend the state constitution.
Well, to do what you're talking about with the 60 and 60, we would not. Because
it still falls within the 120.
That's right.
Okay.
So that's why I would take that approach versus trying to do something we have to change the Constitution. And I think for where we are, that's a great first step.
Yeah.
And I think to address things like your bill, like the budgets with the schools and the marijuana money and things, I think that instead of thinking in these 2-year increments, if we know we've got to do this every year, then we become proactive and then we address issues in real time instead of saying, oh, well, session's over, 2 years, we'll deal with it. Or then on the last day of session, passing 150 bills.
Yeah, I actually
without reading them.
Endorsement.
Right.
Yeah, it's amazing how 98% of the bills get passed in the last day of the session.
But that's the system we've designed.
No, it is.
And I understand why, because you got to try to work it and get it as close to what you want as possible. And then before that clock strikes midnight, and everything is void, you got to get it passed. So I understand why it takes to the last minute. And I think there's a better way.
What would you do about the uprising of crime as a freshman legislature?
So crime is one of those issues that...
Was that ever mentioned on your walks, on your knocks on the doors?
Crime did not come up very often. I'm very fortunate.
Everybody in that area got guns. That's probably what.
Well, we got a lot of guns, for sure. A variety.
Well, I know one that does, for sure.
Yeah. So I grew up with a granddad that hunted. Mm-hmm. And so you go to the basement, and we have basements in Michigan. We don't have those.
I'm from South Dakota, so
okay.
We have basements.
I love basements.
Yeah, but
that's
you go
where all
down
the
there.
Parties are.
Yeah, but he has these racks, or had, because he's passed on now, but just all kind of different rifles and handguns and things. And that's back before you had to lock guns up and hide them from kids and that sort of thing. Yeah. It was just a different day.
Yeah.
But
a different day.
It was. We did things differently. The world was different. But my neighbors are very similar in that respect. But we don't have crime because we're, number one, a newer area. Overall, and I shouldn't say we don't have crime. We have crime. Everywhere has crime. Mm-hmm. But we're a newer area. We are more affluent. We have better schools overall. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of factors that make our area less prone. And so when I look at addressing crime, I don't look at the crime. To me, so picture an iceberg. Crime is the tip that we see. That's the expression. Right. But underneath the surface, that's where 90% of the iceberg is. What's underneath the surface? Education. What's underneath the surface? Kids that are hungry, that don't have after-school programs. What's under the surface? Mental illness. What's under the surface? Addiction. So there are all of these other unaddressed issues. When you talk about crime, I could put 1,000 new officers on every block. That wouldn't solve the crime problem. You just lock people up. What you have to do is meet it at the root and give people what they need to survive. People who are desperate, who are in need, are going to resort to whatever they can in order to get their needs met. And one major need of all people is connection, relationship. What's happened in the last 10 years? We stopped going outside and playing at parks together. Yeah. We've gotten on social media. And so the girls are all isolated from each other. The boys are pretending to be whatever they are. And they're not learning how to collaborate and how to play. You don't have the sports teams that are just organically formed. You don't have the music programs and theater that teach you how to get along and, resolve conflict. When I grew up, I was an only child. I have 2 half siblings. So I had my own room. But when my parents grew up, they had to share rooms with siblings, and they had one TV in the house. So you had to negotiate what TV show you're going to watch. Right. In our day, every kid got an iPad. They can watch whatever they want, whenever they want. Right. So there's no conflict resolution skill. So you have to think about all those factors.
Right, there is no conflict resolution.
Yeah. So you have to learn how to do that. And when you're bored, idle hands make for the devil's work. That's what my grandma used to say. So we do have tagging that's happening. We've never had that before, but it's happening because they're not occupied. Right. And they need that. And they need that guidance and that love from their parents. Mm-hmm. When you have parents that can't eat dinner with you every night, what do you do? Right. Like, how do you build those relationships? And too many people are working multiple jobs, too far from home, don't have the energy once they get home to be with their kids or their family. Like it's a lot of issues. Disconnected, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Then you become a rebel.
Yeah.
And do your own thing, and nobody's going to discipline you because there's nobody's around to discipline you.
Yeah.
And then you end up in the prison system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
because you need that guidance.
You need it. But then you go in the prison system, and prison doesn't do what, like what I would think it would do, which is to make you a better person.
Right. Yeah.
You get to become a better criminal because the system is designed to, when you get out, how do you get a job? Especially if you're a felon, like if you got a felony on your record, you won't even get past the electronic screening in most instances. I know that's illegal, but if people listening, that was air quotes around illegal.
Yeah, I've always had a little bit of I'm not educated on it probably as well as I should be, but I've always been a little, it's always weird for me how I feel about the whole felon thing, because I kind of feel like, hey, if you've paid your debt to society, kind of like, should felons be able to vote, right? And a lot of people are like, absolutely not. Me, I've always been on, depends on what the felony was, whether it was, so, I agree with you on that. I think that we should look at, as far as felonies, like as long as it's not a violent felony, maybe we should cut back on some of the restrictions on that.
Like a white collar crime. Basically.
Yeah.
Instead,
money laundering
or something like that. Yeah.
So I'm gonna get in trouble. I know
tax evasion.
We're on,
tax evasion. Yeah. Well.
So if I was picking, I think all felons, if you've served your time, you're no longer a felon. I think if you've done your time,
rape?
If you've done your time, I think that you've done what you're supposed to. And if we just have to pick one, like you still got to suffer even after you're out, the white collar crime is what I'm more concerned about. If you're doing manipulation of finances and that sort of thing, that's the kind of crime that people are actually most impacted by, but don't necessarily see. Because those criminals
like
are
Ponzi
bad
schemes
people.
And stuff.
Yeah, those criminals didn't hurt anybody. Oh no, they really hurt people. They destroyed families. And when you have someone that's taken someone's entire retirement away or their life savings, that person is traumatized and they're prone to violence now. So again, everything is interconnected.
Yeah, I get it.
Well, what would you do about the corruption that's in the courtrooms? Like judges blatantly violating state law, federal law, blatantly violating it. In 2 sessions ago, we tried to have an inspector general, somebody that's able to just walk into a courtroom and observe and take notes. And if they see a violation, go ahead and take it upon and, start doing investigation. Would you consider doing something like that, having an inspector general or some type of legislative or judicial branch that is able to walk in the courtrooms and make sure that people's rights are not violated?
Yeah, I think transparency is critical in all aspects of government. So one thing that did come out of COVID that's positive is now you can use blue jeans. And you can look in on just about any
When I first heard blue jeans, I was like, man, get me a pair of those Levi's.
Right.
I know, honestly, I was lost too. If it wouldn't have been for you, I would have had no idea. I was like, what?
So blue jeans is like Zoom for court. Like that's what it basically is. Yeah. But now anyone can look in and see what's happening. I do think that there needs to be some mechanism that quality control is what we call it in my industry. We look at what's happening. And I think that there needs to be review, which is why, of course, we have appellate courts and things of that nature. I will say that I have had the privilege of meeting some incredible judges. And again, the people of Southern Nevada are just remarkable individuals. And we have so much potential. I don't think we're meeting that potential. I think we can do a whole lot better. But I think of a newly elected judge. We're the first Black judge in that court system in North Las Vegas. And I know him personally, compassionate human being.
We endorsed him.
Oh, great. And, he's a man of character and conviction.
Some Cutter.
Ketter. Yep.
Ketter.
You got it. Yeah. So folks like that are on the bench already. We just need more folks like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
and you got your gavel. So
yeah, that's right. Mr. Rucker, I don't know if you're aware, but there's a lot of correctional officers that are bringing contrabands in the prison system and passing them on to prison leaders, Aryan Nation, Guerrilla Brotherhood, Levata, well, all of them. What would you do about correctional officers that are doing this, that are actually breaking the law?
Yeah, and that's a big one. So for me, the entire prison industry is in dire need of reform from top to bottom. The way that we treat human beings is inhumane. And so that type of activity is simply the result of the structures we've built. And it will not change until we decide to change. And I think we need to change and rapidly.
Well, how would you tighten that up?
As a first-term legislator, honestly, it's not much I could do. You know, because I have to prioritize. I'm a voice. I can certainly give voice to that.
Carry a title,
and
the things people want to listen.
The things that come up, I can certainly support and lend the bit of influence I have to supporting that. And it's a change that starts with going back to, like I mentioned, coming together more than once every 2 years. And I know we have special sessions. I'm not saying that we only see each other that often, but we have to fix some things in order to begin to fix others.
Right.
That's one of the things that while I think it's terribly important, like I'm against the death penalty. I think that's a critical issue we need to address as a state.
You know why? I would be against it because, well, if you got somebody that's dead, I mean, you know they did it. I mean, there's no doubt that they did it. I mean, cameras, they did it. But when you have, one guy testifying and then you find out that it's the wrong guy years later, then there's a problem. Yeah. So if you kill the guy and then find out that he really didn't do it, that's a problem, right? That's a problem. So, yeah, I would agree with you to some extent.
Yeah. Well, I think I agree with you. I think that the death penalty should go away in the state of Nevada. The reason why, for me, is I hate to say this, but that's part of it. But the other part of it, too, is the cost factor. I mean, we don't. This is kind of a bad way to put it, but I'm going to put it this way anyway. We don't use it anyway. Very rarely do we actually sentence someone to death. What ends up happening is they get appeal after appeal after appeal after appeal, and I think that just it's not cost effective. It ends up costing a lot of money, and it's tying up the court system on things it doesn't need to tied up on. And then I also think, too, that if somebody does something like that and you put them in prison for life, that's actually worse than death.
And I think the general public.
Yeah. I think putting someone to death that does a real heinous crime is probably too compassionate. Let them live behind bars the rest of their life. That's why I'm against death penalty.
Yeah. And a lot of people may say that maybe you're being soft on crime. And I don't see it that way. Because, I mean, the point of our system is really to rehabilitate people. Right. But we don't do that. What we do is we stick them in cages and treat them like animals and then wonder why when they come out, they don't know how to live in our society.
Some people would say that they're an animal before they even went in.
Well, I would say to those people, you don't know their story. You don't know what led up to that moment. And if you walked a mile in their shoes, you probably would end up in the same spot.
And what about the people that kill the innocent?
Well, again, with them, you don't know their story. I look at, and this is a little out.
Let me just stop you right there. People would say that, but we're all human.
Yep.
And if somebody was to kill somebody you truly love, you'd want to take them out.
Yeah. But in my case, it's not a hypothetical. So this isn't me, saying, well, if it happened and someone I knew that I cared deeply about experienced this, that's not a hypothetical for me. This is things I've been through. So the thing is, we're asking folks what's wrong with this person instead of what happened to them. And we need to start dealing with trauma and the root causes of these issues. So when you're looking at the entire justice system, it's really an injustice system because you're putting people into predicaments where the only outcome for them, the only logical next step It's for them to come out and be worse than when they went in. So we have to fix that. And until we do, we're going to keep getting the same results. The other part of that is when you put a kid in jail. So scientifically, based on the facts, the brain doesn't finish developing until 25. Later for men in many cases.
Well, they say 25 for women and 30 for men.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that's what I heard.
So, and we're talking about a 16-year-old, and you're sentencing that kid. 8 years ago, it was an 8-year-old. 3 years before that, they were in kindergarten.
Right.
And you're sentencing them to life in jail. That to me does not make sense. Right. We've got to think about this from a holistic perspective and say they weren't ready to even make a decision in that way. So without going way off, but kind of.
It's a catch-22 because if you're the victim, if you're the one that's suffering a loss, you're like, I want this person dead. I don't care what age they are.
Some people are that way. And because of their trauma, their pain, they want to get hurt people is a common saying. Yeah. But you're talking about the victim. In our current system, the perpetrator, the person that commits the crime, cannot say, I am sorry, I did that to you. Mm-hmm. They have to say, I didn't do it. And they have to go through this trial process and all of that.
That's very interesting because my brother Steve brought up the same thing. Is because unfortunately, that's just the way the system works.
And but you shouldn't work that way.
Yeah, because there's not, it's like you're either guilty or you're innocent. And like, there's never an attempt to figure out like, okay, this person didn't do it, who did? Mm-hmm. So it's like, you always have to say whether you're guilty or not.
Mm-hmm. And even beyond
because if you found guilty, you're going to be locked up for.
Even if they are guilty, they should be able to say, I did it. I'm sorry. What can I do? What do you, as the person who was harmed, how do you want to be healed in this situation? Yeah. So we were talking about crime. And the point that I wanted to make was our system doesn't allow for the person that was harmed to have any voice in what happens, or for the person that caused the harm to make it right. And so it's either, I'm not guilty or I'm guilty. There's no opportunity for that individual to say, I'm sorry. What is it that you need from me? And the person that was harmed may say, you need to go to jail for life. That could be a thing. But they may also say, wow, what I really wanted was to be made whole. I really want this to be made right, not for you to, just spend the rest of your life in jail. So we have to think about this from a human-centered perspective. Mm-hmm. If we really want to deter crime, we've got to give people the opportunity to be human and to make mistakes and to learn from their mistakes so that they can do better going forward. Crime, there's a thought out there that crime causes things like poverty and inequity. And I would say that's actually the reverse. The thing that causes crime is poverty. The thing that causes crime is inequity. It's those are the things that drive it. Now, I'm not saying that you don't have outliers of folks who they probably are better behind bars. Like I absolutely believe that that's a percentage of the population, but it's not as many millions as we have in this country. And so we have to do better.
So I got one more quick thing on it, just from a technical or a logistics standpoint. One of the issues that has been brought up several times now, and we had, I forget his name now, Len Cornelli, is that his name?
Oh, Lenny Cornelli, the North Las Vegas retired lieutenant, police officer.
Yeah, one of the things that he was bringing up is now, because as unpopular as it is to be a cop, but I don't want to get into the cops part of it. I more want to get into the correctional officers. So when we talk about locking people up in jail, one of the things that I have a friend of mine that's actually a correctional officer at the Las Vegas City Jail. And he said one of the problems they're having right now is because they are so understaffed with correctional officers that they are actually, some days, the Las Vegas City Jail is on a 23-hour lockdown.
Wow.
Even for people that are nonviolent people, and it's just a city jail. It's not a prison. So you could have people that like they get pulled over for speeding. They happen to have a warrant. They take them in. They are literally locked in a cell. If they have to stay for a couple days to pay off the warrant or whatever, they're literally locked in that cell for 23 straight hours because of the fact that the way the state law works is if they only have 2 correctional officers, depending on how many inmates they have in an actual pod, they don't have enough people to properly supervise them. So the only answer they have is to keep them locked in the cell.
For their own safety.
For their own safety. So what you're doing is you have anywhere from 2 to 6 people being locked in a cell together for 23 hours. And they were having a rise in inmates hurting each other because they're locked in that little cell for so long. Would you be willing to, if you're elected, look into at least trying to staff the city jails better with correctional officers so that they can start? It shouldn't be Club Med, you're in jail, I get that. But you lock anybody up for 23 hours a day, it's going to be a problem.
Shit, look what COVID did when they're locked into their house.
Yeah.
So how crazy they got.
I mean, I've heard this guy was talking to me about how he's got one inmate gets 2 cookies, the other one accidentally only gets 1. And the one that ended up only getting 1 stabs the other guy in the neck with these little pencils that they give him like 8 times and tries to kill him over a cookie. And this has been increasing. Right. Yeah. Right. That's one thing. But anyway, I just want to let you know that is an issue that's going on in some of the city jails. Would you be willing to try to address that?
We have to address it. And so it goes back to, again, the system structure. 2 things on that. One, I think we have to decriminalize poverty, period. We also have to decriminalize being mentally ill. And I think right now, and here's what I mean by that, to be clear. When you find someone for an offense, if you are a billionaire and you get a $100 speeding ticket, you haven't been punished in any way. But if you're at poverty and you get a $100 speeding ticket, you can't pay that ticket.
Right.
And now you end up in the system, right? Yeah. So that's what I mean by poverty is criminalized. Similarly with mental health, if you have a mental health issue, a severe mental health issue, and you have a break or you just act out or whatever, maybe you didn't get your medicine right that day, you end up in the system and you really need to be in care. So we have to decriminalize that. But on the policing side, in communities of color, particularly African-American communities, Black communities, being a police officer is being a sellout. And it's because of the repeated offenses we have experienced as a community. So we have to change the way policing is viewed in order to recruit, because we do need to recruit more officers. Here's what I believe. I believe that we need to have focused law enforcement. Right now, we have law enforcement that's kind of like these lights in here. It's a widespread. It covers everything from cats and trees to, axe murderers, right? We need to focus in and have officers do the thing that they were trained for, be able to devote their time to actually fight crime. And they need to have a mandatory sabbatical at regular intervals. Because when you deal with that level of trauma, and I'm not a police officer, I've never done police service, I've never been in the military, though I have family members that have done all of that. But when you experience that level of trauma on a consistent basis, when your system is stressed on that level, that consistently, how can you be rational at any time? It's almost impossible. So you're creating a system where you have a heightened person in a state of trauma. When you're in a state of trauma, your rational brain is offline and you go back to that instinctual survival brain. And I'm not trying to be super technical, right?
Yeah.
But when you have that system, you can't help but to have the incidents that we have and the mistakes that we have. It's just the natural outcome of people being overtaxed. So similar to teachers, they need to be able to teach. Law enforcement needs to fight crime and do that and keep us safe. They're doing way too much. Firefighters, the same case. They need to be fighting fires. Medical professionals, they need to be providing medical services. Right. Instead, right now, we have everybody doing a little bit of everything, and nobody's doing anything in a really, truly effective and efficient way.
What are you going to do to decriminalize the family court? Because people show up in family court and the judges act like they're doggone, they just robbed a bank or something. You know, they're over there trying to get visitation of their kids, or trying to get custody, or trying to divorce the butthead over here. Mm-hmm. But the way some of these judges act, with lacking judicial temperament, yelling at litigants and just treating them like they're a common criminal, you know. Plus, do you believe in the Constitution?
Yes.
Okay. So, are you familiar with the 7th Amendment, the right to a jury? Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with the 14th Amendment, the right to a fair judiciary?
Yeah.
Do you believe when they don't have a jury box in family court and leave it up to one judge to make a decision, do you think that might be a little bias there, giving one person that much power, especially when it comes to relocation of children, which is a civil debt, and when it comes to termination of parental rights, civil debt? Do you think one person should be allowed to have that much power over a person's life that's probably going to go from generation, because, you know, if you take a kid away from a parent, it's going to affect them forever. It's going to affect the kid. Do you think one person should have that much power? Or do you think that we need to have some type of jury that decides that, or a tribunal, 3-judge panel instead of one judge ruling that much power over families?
Yeah. I've experienced that as well, and just seeing the harshness that can come out of that. There's a lot of bias. We all have an implicit bias. Even the goal will never not have a bias, but the goal is to become aware of it and then to counterbalance. We need to have a more diverse judiciary that understands different backgrounds and cultures, that isn't sexist, because you have a lot of that. And you don't have to be a man to be sexist, you know. So we have a number of issues that need to be dealt with. And I think that what you're suggesting is one way to consider balancing that a bit. But I think we need to go even deeper.
The jury.
I think we could do jury for sure.
In family court.
Yeah, I think we could. And I mean, do families want their business in front of a jury? You know,
their business is already out there.
Yeah.
You know. Once you walk into a courtroom, your business is out there. Yeah. I tell a lot of litigants, don't do that. Figure it out on your own. You know, go to mediation or figure it out amongst yourself, and go to a paralegal and write the order up and send it to the courthouse, have the judge sign off on it. Done deal. No business out there. Yeah. But this constant bickering and this is mine, this mine, and then you got a judge wielding all his power over you. You know, that is no way to live your life. I have one litigant. She's been in the courtroom for 14 years. 14 years. Wow. She's had about 8 judges. Really? Yeah. You want to spend that much time and that much anguish and that much financial money into this system and giving your money away? I tell litigants, I said, you know what? I said, stop putting your money into these attorneys and these third-party entities like paralegals and lawyers and guardian ad litems and therapists and counselors. And if you take that money and you put it into your child's savings account for education, how much poverty will we just wiped out? And how many educated people will we just rise above? You know, but all this does is push people down, make their pockets light, make them be frustrated and anxious and have all kinds of stress problems and mental illness. And then when you're so pushed down and you have no income coming in because you have no education, then what do? You go criminal. And now you're in the prison system, right? But if they took all that money that they throw at these doggone attorneys and put in their children's education fund, what a better world we'll live in. Yeah. You know? So maybe we need to educate. Maybe there has to be some type of mandatory class you go to before you even see the judge. Mandatory class you go to advise you on what to do and how to co-parent and how to handle your children and all this before you even see a judge. Maybe that might eliminate or alleviate a lot of these financial burdens that goes on with these litigants. Because remember, 65% of litigants go pro se. They represent themselves, right? And the ones that don't represent themselves have thrown money away on attorneys. And the ones that do, they get fired because they're spending more time in court than they're at their actual job. Well, what could you do to kind of streamline the family court system, which is totally corrupt, totally biased, totally in disarray, and it's not fair to people that are already struggling, losing their families, now to walk into a courtroom to be chastised by a judge that doesn't even know anything about you, don't even care about you. You're just a number to them, and they're going to get a paycheck. You know, what could you do to streamline this family court system?
Yeah. I mean, a number of issues you bring up, and I hear you, and I feel all of that. What I would say is I think that an investment in counseling and therapy is worthwhile. I think that every single couple should have access to qualified couples counseling, premarital counseling. So I also have the privilege of being a marriage officiant in Las Vegas. You know, we are the wedding capital of the world.
I'm a marriage officiant too.
Yeah. So, but I get to do those, you know, multiple times a week for couples from Italy and France and right here in the USA. And out of those couples, less than probably a quarter have ever been to any type of premarital counseling. We need to get folks premarital counseling. But then once you're in the marriage, you need to have someone that can help you communicate, because most couples don't divorce because of money or because of infidelity. They divorce because they can't communicate with each other well. And that's, you know, whether it's same-sex couple, opposite, you know, all the different genders, it doesn't matter. It crosses income levels and education. It's hard for two individuals to be married and communicate. Mm-hmm. So they need a translator, which is what a good counselor is for them. So we need to provide those services to deal with the problems before they're problems. So that's my approach, is providing this in advance, dealing with root causes, not just the symptoms. Because once they get to family court, they're mad. That brain is offline already. Trauma. Offline. It is. And they're just trying to fight to be right in most cases. You have some couples that do what's in the best interest of the child, and, you know, hats off to them. But that's the minority group, because you get so entangled in being right that you forget what's righteous. So you have to deal with the root causes, is my perspective. A lot
of, I mean, granted, there are some litigants that have mental problems, and there's some litigants that have drug problems. But once they go through the family court system, it makes it even worse.
Yeah.
Now they have more of a mental problem. They have more of a drug problem. It's not less. It gets more because of the way the system is. Yeah. And the system needs to be streamlined.
Let me give you an example. So it's similar, but it's a different field. This is in medicine. So my husband is a nurse, and he works in one of the wings that you wouldn't expect a lot of issues. It's like a surgical wing. So, but what happens is you could have someone that is unhoused that comes in for a surgery that's medically necessary. They have to come in through ER, whatever it may be. They end up on his floor. And then they have to release that person back into an environment that's not suitable for healing. That person has no home to return to heal. So what happens? They're well enough to be released, but not actually well. And so that person ends up back in the ER, back in this wing, and it's this brutal cycle.
So it's a revolving door.
A revolving door, because we didn't deal with the actual issue. So we have to stop with these Band-Aid fixes and patchworking all of this together to say, oh, well, we did something. No, you didn't. You just kicked the can down the road. Yeah. You have to deal with the issue.
Well, you hit the nail on the head, because that's the biggest problem with politics the last probably 100 years in this country.
Yeah. Which is that?
They just kick the can down the road.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing ever gets solved.
And here's why.
Because they focus on BS crap.
Right. Yeah.
As a politician, this is the strangest job in the world. Your job is to get reelected. It's not to make a difference. It's not to get things done. Especially at the federal level, most of your time is spent fundraising. Most of my time as a candidate spent fundraising.
How much you raised?
We're not going to talk about that.
Okay.
It's public record, but it costs a lot of money to run a campaign. And even once you're in office, to stay there, you have to stay in the donor's good graces. So that issue in and of itself creates this system where, we really could, there's about $1 billion that's unallocated right now from the Recovery Act. We could house every Nevadan with that money. But there are so many different competing interests that it's not even on the table to do. We could invest in a mental health infrastructure. $1 billion is 1,000 million.
Right.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
We can do a lot with that, but we don't, because you're answering to so many masters who are giving you the campaign donations so that you can get reelected. And for those listening who don't know, as an elected official in the Assembly or the Senate, we don't make money. Like it's a pay cut for when we go up there. It's not a paid gig. But you have to campaign and raise. We raise way more money than we make.
But you get housing, you get transportation,
kind of ish.
You get like a cola, a food.
Kind of ish.
Yeah.
I
rent a car.
I will tell you, in my case, and I work in nonprofit, so I am not making the big bucks. When I go to Carson,
tell us about it.
Right. When I go to Carson in February, it's a downgrade in lifestyle. It's not an upgrade. It is by no means an upgrade. It's not a cushy job. There are some perks. You have influence and you get invited to wonderful donor funded parties and that kind of thing. So there are some of those perks, but it's not a cushy job. But even in that terrible, no paid gig, you still have to fight for the next election. And that is one of the fundamental challenges and why we can't get things done. One, we're not there often enough. We're not there long enough. And then you're always working towards the next election and pleasing the donors that have funded your campaign. I don't operate that way. Like, you wrote me a check, that's wonderful, but I came here to do something.
Right.
So, it's a little different. And thankfully in Nevada, we do have a lot of folks that have that attitude. But it's a fundamental system problem. And that's what we have to address.
Well, before we let you go, what are you going to do about veterans?
I was waiting on that question.
There you go.
Veterans are a high priority. So my grandfather is a veteran from the Army. And for years, for most of his life, he did not get access to his VA benefits. Most of his life. He's 82 now, 81. Granddad, I'm sorry, I should know how old you are, but he's in early 80s. And until the last 5 years, all of his medical expenses and he was shot. And, so he gets money for being wounded and things like that now. But until my uncle, who's also a vet, went into the system and learned all of the benefits that was available, he didn't take them. So one of the key things for me is to make sure that every single veteran knows what they are entitled to. And
how you plan on doing that?
We've got to do outreach. We've got to do educational efforts. We've got to invest in getting the resources out there. It's not enough to say, oh yeah, the fridge is full of food. We got to get you a pathway to get to the fridge, let you know that there is a pathway to the fridge, let you know that there is a fridge. So that for me is a big priority. Okay. And I think that alleviates a number of issues. But the other part of that is investing in mental health services. We've got to make sure folks that have served our country in extreme circumstances are well cared for. The last thing I'll say on that, and this is more of a federal issue, but we can handle this in Nevada too. We need times of peace. I'm tired of having veterans that are war vets. I think that that's the most absurd thing in the world. We need to be in times of peace and doing the things that are right so that we can continue in times of peace. How do you stay in peace? I feel like you need to carry a big stick. That helps, right? People don't mess with you. And we also just have to be smarter about the issues that we as a nation get involved in and how we approach it. We need to be focused on peace, not on war.
Are you going to vote to raise your taxes?
Am I going to vote to raise taxes? I don't know. And I'm honest. I mean, I could say, oh, no, I'll never raise taxes. You know, what was it? Read my lips.
What would make you vote to raise taxes?
If it made sense. If it was what was best for Nevadans.
Would you reach out to your constituents and ask them?
Absolutely. I believe in outreach. So I'm going as a representative. I mean, I have great ideas of my own, and I'm not being hired for an innovator job. I'm being hired to represent the needs of my district and the people of my district with the lens of what's happening in the state. Now, I can ask you about, you know, what's happening in your house, and you know what's happening there, but you may not know about the oil spill down the street that's about to get you. So I need to be aware of that too, and make decisions that are in your best interest. And I need your perspective. How do you want me to deal with this? Do we want to divert it? Do we want to use it? Like, what are we doing? So that's my perspective.
Do we cover everything you'd like covered?
I think that and more.
Oh. Jim, do you have anything for Mr. Rucker?
No, other than thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate it. Best of luck in the race.
Jim goes, okay, I know Jim is ready to go.
I answered what I needed answered. So,
Well, Mr. Rucker, I wanna thank you for coming on the program. You know, we really appreciate it. And if you look into the camera right there, Mark will zoom in on you, and you tell folks why they should go to the voting booth and vote for you. You tell Republicans why they should go to the voting booth and vote for you, and independent Americans and libertarians and nonpartisan candidates.
Nonpartisan, Green Party.
Yeah, why they need to go to the voting booth and vote for you, and your point of contact, please.
All right, perfect. Will Rucker, candidate for Assembly District 13. My website is electwillrucker.com. And the reason that you should vote for me is because I'm going to do what's right for all of us. I'm not beholden to any party line, anything like that. I'm beholden to your needs and your interests. I take a broad view and a wide approach to things. I don't make snap judgments and snap decisions. I think about not just what's best for our bottom line, but what's best for us all down the line. So vote for me to vote for your future. I believe that we need to be healthier, happier, and more hopeful. And if you put me in the seat, I'll make sure that I work every day to make sure we are all healthier, happier, and more hopeful.
And your point of contact?
And point of contact is will@electwillrucker. You can email me there. I'll give you my phone number, 2702-483-8007. You can text me. That's my cell phone. Call. I'm always happy to dialogue. Email me, and I'll get back with you for sure.
Well, Mr. Rucker, thank you so much. Jim, thank you. Folks, that's Will Rucker, Assembly candidate for District number 13. We hope you enjoyed the show. We hope it was educated for you. This is Steve Sanson, Jim Jones for Veterans in Politics. Until next time.